Give a quick shout out to the team behind the scenes that's putting this together, especially C3. Just there's a lot of effort that goes into it and a huge team. So thank you to all of you for making this happen and giving this opportunity to our community. First,
thank you, Matt.
Yep. Also want to thank everybody for being here. And thanks, Linda, for letting me introduce the film, the filmmaker, and our featured speaker. The filmmaker is Delaney Rustin, who's a filmmaker and a primary care physician. She's Stanford trained and an international speaker who makes documentaries to foster social change. She's the creator of the award-winning film Screenagers, which is the focus today, about solutions for healthy screen time, and Screenagers Next Chapter, about improving the emotional well-being of today's youth. Thus far, 4.5 million kids and adults have gathered for screenings in 85 countries. As a known expert on this topic, the filmmaker Delaney is invited to speak at Google, the Aspen Institute, conferences, schools, and others, and her views are often in the press, such as Good Morning America, NPR, New York Times, and many others. Examples of other films include Unlisted, a story of schizophrenia, about her father, and Hidden Pictures, about global mental health. Rustin has partnered with groups such as the World Health Organization in creating advocacy campaigns and has won several awards for her efforts. A Fulbright scholar and a former researcher in bioethics and communication, Dr. Rustin has been a faculty member at the University of Washington School of Medicine in Seattle and at Stony Brook School of Medicine in New York. Along with filmmaking, Delaney currently provides medical care to the underserved and homeless, which she has done for over a decade. And now, without further ado, an intro for our speaker, Allie Tabb. Allie is a licensed social worker and therapist in Indianapolis, Indiana. According to Allie, life does not always go according to plan. It takes courage and strength to admit it's time to seek help when you or your loved one is in need of support. An investment in therapeutic relationship can allow you and your family to find a healthier way of interacting with one another and the world around you. Allie's had the privilege of working with individuals and families navigating challenges such as depression, anxiety, trauma, family conflict, and sexually maladaptive behaviors. Hope is possible. Allie operates from the assumption we are all doing our best and we all have areas we can improve. Therapy is a powerful tool for growth, especially when we are humble, honest, and willing to try new things. Allie seeks to model these traits within the therapeutic relationship. And with that, Allie, we will throw it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, everyone. And to the folks that are in the crowd, I want to acknowledge it is really great that you're here. I can't see you and you can see me, and that is sort of a strange dynamic to experience. And nonetheless, I'm really glad that you're here. My hope for today is that everyone is going to walk away feeling a little bit connected to each other, definitely more connected to yourself, and you're gonna have some specific tools to apply with whatever population it is that you work with. So I've got a whole PowerPoint that we're gonna be able to look at, because goodness knows we haven't seen enough PowerPoints lately on Zoom. And we're also gonna have, my hope is to make this as interactive as possible. So to begin, if you could go ahead and, I'm sorry, are we asking folks to use the chat or the Q&A?
Q&A for questions, and chat room just for comments or thoughts they're having about what you're talking about.
Okay, so if folks then in the chat, this is always helpful for me to, kind of get a sense of who's in the audience. If you wouldn't mind just saying, your name will kind of pop up when you type in the chat, but what is your primary role? And then what is it that brought you to today's presentation? So go ahead and take a couple of minutes doing that. And while you do that, I'm gonna fire up my PowerPoint. Here's the screen share. That. All right, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Go ahead and go into the present mode. All right, and would you all mind helping me, the panelists, field anything that people put in the chat? That kind of just gives me an idea of who all we've got.
Ellie, I'll keep an eye on it and kind of periodically reference it, okay? And throw questions at you as you're ready for them.
Awesome,
Okay.
awesome, cool. So it looks like we've got Student Service Director, Director of Community Programs at a prevention organization, C3 board member, CASA volunteer, 4-H youth development educator, adolescent coach with life coaching, prevention specialist, parent and mental health and addiction, SVS. I'm not sure what SVS means. Parent of 2 boys who want to stay in the know about technology, great physical therapist and a parent, father of 2 and school administrator. We have folks that work at a teen center and youth services center, parents, great. This is great. Excellent. Mental health and addiction services board member, excellent. So what this tells me, and everyone else, feel free to continue, popping in your role and what is it that brought you today. But already I can see that we have a few things in common. One, we're all connected somehow to teenagers and children. 2, we recognize there is a need for education related to supporting kids with technology use. And then hopefully 3, everyone's also been able to see the film. So go ahead and do that. So this is going to be about an hour and a half of, you're going to get CEUs for an hour and a half. And the way that I've designed all of the presentations that I do and kind of community dialogue is I really hope for it to be interactive, because I really believe that community is our strongest resource, especially when we are thinking about all the different things that we are supporting kids to navigate in the world. We are part of this problem and we're part of the solution. So please, use the chat. If you have questions, put those in the Q&A. What we're gonna do is about 45 minutes, about 40 minutes of me kind of going through a presentation. And then I'm just gonna open it up and I want us to be able to dialogue. And what we'll be able to do then is kind of identify, what are the major challenges that you all experience related to screens, and then whoever your primary client population is. And then we're going to develop and apply strategies based on what we've learned from Screenagers and the group discussion. And a final objective that I have for everyone is that we walk away feeling hopeful, because again, 2020, gosh, everyone, it has been a year, hasn't it? And so my hope for all of us is that we're able to walk away feeling connected with this idea that while things can be really challenging and everyone can get real dysregulated sometimes, we also have so many internal resources, and we, just like the kids that we serve, whether that's as a school administrator or a teacher or working at a youth center or mental health professional, we are able to tap into resiliency and support that resiliency with the young people that we work with. So that's my hope that we'll all walk away with today. So have there been any other things in the chat that people added? I want to make sure and touch on just about roles that they have. Looks like we covered it. Okay.
I think you covered it. Yep.
Great. Okay. All right. So before we really get going, I just want to share this little quote. Says, "We may not be coping as well as we'd like, but we are coping, and that's enough." And so I, a little bit about me, like Matt shared, I'm a therapist. I work here in Indianapolis. I have a private practice. I'm also working on my doctorate at the Indiana University School of Social Work. And part of being a doctorate student is teaching classes. And, wouldn't you know it, teaching my very first class at the MSW level, spring 2020, just when there is a global pandemic. And so this is actually a quote that I had shared with the class immediately after everything went online. And it's one that I feel like it's pertinent to still kind of continue pointing back to, because this is an unprecedented time. And you are getting a CEU, you are participating in continuing education online because of a global pandemic here today, October 15th, 2020. So I just kind of like to point that out so that we can all kind of give ourselves a little pat on the back. Because as far as I'm aware, no one has probably experienced everything that we've experienced this year before in such a concentrated amount of time. You know, at one point there were killer bees, I think, that were going around. Things have been on fire. There's been civil unrest. It's an election year. I like to joke with my clients, is there anything that hasn't happened in 2020? But then I realized I probably shouldn't ask that too soon. But I just think it's really important to acknowledge that whatever your role is, whatever different way you're kind of connecting with youth, children, tweens, teens, young adults, you have made it this far. If there's one thing I can say about all of the people that I work with, is that we all have an excellent track record. So there's not a single situation that anyone here today, and you know, I can see there's over 30 people, there's not a single situation that you all have not made it through. You all have an excellent track record. And I just really think it's important for us to connect with that, because it's easy to get overwhelmed, to think of all the things we're doing wrong or not doing a good enough job of. The kids that we work with definitely have a lot of that, you know, kind of going on in their head, the things they're missing out on. So what I'd like to invite everyone to do is, for a moment, if you'd like to close your eyes, you can. If not, that's fine too. But just go ahead and put your hand approximately where you think your heart is. And once you've found it, I just want to invite you to do a few deep breaths in through your nose. Open mouth, exhale. In through your nose. Open mouth, exhale. And just for a moment, see if you can find your heartbeat. It's in there somewhere beneath all the stress and your to-do lists, the dinner that you have to make tonight, the plans that you have for the weekend. Your heartbeat's in there. So just take a moment to find it. And when you found it, breathe in and exhale. And breathe in and exhale. Thank you. You know, I know asking folks to practice mindfulness can feel kind of funny when we're online. You know, we're not all in the room together. Our mirror neurons aren't firing quite the same way. I cannot underscore enough the benefit of pausing for a second throughout the day. And maybe for some of you, this is the first time you've been able to do that in a little while. There is a lot of really fascinating fMRI scan type research studies that look at the benefits of just doing some simple breath work has on overall well-being, on brain functioning. And so if you were able to challenge yourself to join and just taking a deep breath for a few moments and finding your heartbeat, your body will thank you, your lungs will thank you, your brain will thank you. And you deserve that, because we may not be coping as well as we'd like, but we are coping, and that's enough. And that's honestly one of the best things that we can do for all the kids that we serve as well. So I say that to just kind of situate, you know, we are tackling a really challenging task. This is a presentation to learn about screenagers and screen use and brain development. And it's not like any of that could happen, you know, when there's not a global pandemic. There's still a global pandemic occurring. Everyone's brain is still being impacted by that, while we're digging into these really important questions about how do we support kids when they're glued to their screens, as we're doing right now for this presentation. So what I'd like to do is just kind of, I'm going to switch to my next slide. So what I'd like for you to do, we're just going to do a little experiment. While we're going throughout this presentation, I would like for all of you to kind of pay attention to how often you feel the urge to multitask. And I say that because I'm a human being and I get it. I've been part of so many presentations over Zoom since 2020 has occurred. And it oftentimes we feel busy, we feel overwhelmed, we have way more to do than we have the time for. So I just kind of want you to all be tracking how often during this next hour and a half do you feel like checking your email or doing some grading on the side or catching up on some notes or any type of multitasking that in a world that operates 24/7, it makes sense. It makes sense that you would want to do that. This is an experiment because sometimes when we just pay attention to how often we want to go somewhere else other than be in the present, well, one, it can kind of reduce the times that we go from being present to not being present. But also what that kind of gives us a sense of is that constant push and pull struggle that most of the kids that we work with experience continually. And if you work with children, you know, especially if you work with teenagers, you know that they are feeling pulled a lot. You know, my phone is right, as you guys can see, my phone is right here, and I have to turn it upside down to make sure that I don't get distracted by it. So just kind of be mindful of that while we're going throughout our presentation together. No judgment, just to kind of notice, you know, wow, I'm a grown up and I've got a fully developed brain and I still feel really pulled during a presentation that I signed up to come to. So just kind of keep that in mind, because what that can do is kind of give, it can be pretty humbling, but it also can kind of give us a sense of what is it that our kids are experiencing from the day to day. So what I would like to know, I've got a short clip that is kind of talking about the movie overall, but what I'd really love, I can play it in a moment, but I wanted to see first, can anyone just kind of share, what was your reaction to watching Screenagers? This is obviously Delaney Rustin, and I pulled this clip up because I recognize a 24-hour time span can sometimes feel like a lifetime. And so if you have watched this documentary more than a day ago, it might feel kind of tough to access. So if it seems like folks haven't been able to watch it, you know, maybe you watched it like a couple weeks ago and you're kind of like, oh gosh, what was going on there? I can play this. But if people can kind of give me an idea about what were things that stuck out to you, then I won't need to play it. We'll be able to just kind of talk off of what people's reactions were. So please go ahead and put, you know, just what were your impressions? What stood out to you? Because this film, it's definitely making waves in a lot of different places, and the second film as well, which is more focused on mental health. So would any of the panelists mind sharing, helping me keep an eye on different things that people are putting out there?
Absolutely. Actually, we had several people talking about multitasking being a normal part of what they do. It's just part of the day, especially when you're trying to accomplish, maybe you're involved and really enjoying many things that you do. And so you multitask so that you can accomplish them all. But I think you really made a relevant point, Allie, about that's what our kids are doing on a constant basis too.
Yeah. Yeah. So multitasking is one thing that kind of stuck out to people. And I'm just looking at this right now too. It looks like someone said, I appreciate this. It was not that bad. Expected worse, because these types of videos are always cheesy, but this was pretty good. I'm glad it wasn't too cheesy. It's hard to make things that are informational not super cheesy. You know, like it's kind of hard to make stuff feel cool when it's really important, pertinent information. That's just real life. So the biggest takeaway is I need to start with myself. How can I ask my teenager daughter to monitor her use when I am not doing a good job myself? Ouch, yeah, that's real. That does sting, doesn't it? That the stories were genuine and typical. Achieve. Glad my kids were older before iPhones hit. Feeling sorry for today's kids and parents. Yes, that's real. Oh yeah, Audrey says this was great. When Tessa said, I could live without the phone for 2 weeks. And then the mom, you know, called her bluff. And then, you know, that was the banging against the door scene. Christina says, it makes me scared for young people and the possibility of creating addiction pathways. And that's real. And we're going to dig into addiction for sure. Made me feel more anxious about my daughter entering her tweens and teens and how we're going to successfully manage it. Even without a phone, she is still so focused on spending time on the computer to watch videos and visit websites. Nancy Carlilani, never mind. Tech and responsible use is a concern for the entire community. Finding balance needs to be, okay, so these are just pouring in. This is great. Teenagers want limitation. Even when her daughter stated she was willing to stay off her phone, within 2 minutes, she was having a meltdown. There's a film, they're in the film, how different our cultural experience and rearing our kids are culturally different. Middle class and those struggling. Yes. Okay, and these might continue to kind of pop in, and I think that that's really great. So there are reactions to the film, is what I'm hearing. And maybe for some people, it was really helpful and interesting. And then for other folks, and this is pretty typical, it was terrifying. It makes me feel anxious. How do I know what I'm doing? Can I do things right? Are we all doomed? And I really hope that, at the very end of the film, one of the doctors that was interviewed said, you know what, it's not too late. When we see documentaries looking at anything that impacts kids, it's really difficult for them to not kind of go into like scare tactics or, scare people straight kind of strategies, which actually the research shows is not that helpful of a way to transmit information. But when we can kind of look at, okay, this documentary pointed out a lot of things that are concerning, and also really pointed out there's just a lot that we don't know, but also recognized humans are resilient. I mean, if we just think for a second about all of the challenges over the past 10 months that humanity has navigated and continues to navigate, even though technology can be really scary and kind of overwhelming, continuing to remember, and there's also a lot of hope. There's a lot of really cool stuff that we can feel hopeful about as well. I think that can kind of help temper some of the scary, intense information and the unknown. So everything that everyone's saying about your reactions, I hear you, it makes sense. We're going to be digging into some specific pieces of it. I've got my presentation kind of sectioned out into a few different pieces that's really highlighting some of the content that was discussed in the screen, but then I go a little bit deeper too, because especially, this film came out in 2016, and since then we've had even more research studies that have been published. So we're going to be able to kind of dig in and also address some of the nuances which the film was able to begin throwing out there. So any other reactions about the film just before I go that maybe weren't shared? Could any of the
I thought Megan made a very strong point here, thinking about her own use and how that's modeling for her very young children. And I think that's throughout this is our third of the series, and we've heard this over and over again. What are we as adults doing? Mm-hmm. Serving as role models. I think it's just another example of that. Mm-hmm. I also want to take a moment, Allie, just to remind people, if you've got questions that Allie can answer, please go ahead and post those in the Q&A so that we can see if there are things that we might be able to address as we're talking today. Thanks, Allie.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like just from the responses that people were able to give that maybe this film is fresh enough in folks' mind that we don't need to, I don't need to go ahead and play this clip. So I'm going to skip over that. But what I have posted here, this is it's like an 8-minute clip kind of looking at different parts of the film that was on a 60 Minutes episode. And I'm happy to make that link available. It's just on YouTube. It's not like a special clip of the movie or anything. So if we look at this first little part that I wanted to kind of help us dig into was just this idea of screen addiction. So, screen addiction. Who here has thought to themselves, kids are addicted to screens? And you can, raise your hand, you can give a thumbs up if you have access to that. People are saying yes, absolutely.
Allie, if I could interrupt for just a moment, I want to be sure to ask everyone, if you're typing in the chat room, right above where you type your message, it says all panelists or all panelists and attendees. If you could please switch to all panelists and attendees so we can hear from everybody and share it out with everybody. Thank you. So again, go ahead and change that for us. Thank you.
So I'm seeing lots of yeses and adults, right? And adults. So I put this up here because the science is still out in terms of actually understanding screen use, internet gaming as an actual addiction. So it's a pretty nuanced conversation. I'm not going to get too super into it because there's still relevant pieces of understanding it using the addiction model, even if technically the DSM-5 and the ICD-10 hasn't decided, okay, internet use is technically an addiction. So I'm going to kind of talk about a few contrasting opinions. So bear with me because, again, this is all still unfolding. We are flying this plane and building it at the same time. And that is kind of an intense situation to be in. But also that means, you know, there are some things that are unknown. And so we can be able to try and be a little bit flexible. You know, if we think, oh, my kid's addicted to alcohol. Oh, well, that sounds really scary. Oh, my kid's addicted to screens. Well, yes, that idea is scary, but one does not necessarily equal the other. And so it's important, I just want to touch on that a little bit, because if you look on, you know, like internet addiction, there are going to be tons and tons and tons of resources that use that unilaterally without kind of acknowledging any of the nuances. And so I just kind of want to talk about some of the ways that that idea has been pushed back against just a little bit. So Common Sense Media, they are an excellent resource if you haven't ever checked them out before. They just have a lot of really good kind of reviews about media use, and that can be video games, social media, where kids get like news information. It's just lots of really helpful stuff. And the thing is, they're able to collect a lot of data because they do have, you know, I mean, nationally, and I think internationally, they access a lot of different populations. So what they said in 2016 was, what looks like excessive use and distraction actually could be a reflection of new ways of maintaining peer relations and engaging in communities that are relevant to them. So that's important for us to kind of keep in mind, because to us as adults, it might feel like addiction because they're interacting in ways that maybe we can't totally relate to. When we lose sight of where they're at brain-wise, and when we don't totally understand what is it that screens, whether it's social media or video games or YouTube or Netflix binging, if we don't totally know like what's going on inside of their brains, we might assume, oh, it's an addiction, and it's like a, we just kind of like slap that label on and it's right up there, the same as heroin addiction, but there are some differences. So children, teens, are navigating a world where interconnectivity over the internet is inevitable. If you are living in the United States of America, you will use the internet. Most of the time you will use it for school, and especially now you're going to be using it for school, unless all your schools have gone back to a, you know, paper and pencil model, which very few have. So kids are navigating a world in which one of their primary developmental tasks is to connect with others. In terms of, you know, the different developmental tasks that teenagers need to be navigating, developing their own sense of identity is huge. And that has kind of shifted in the way that that's occurring. So when I was growing up, the way that I would navigate my sense of identity to differentiate me from my parents would be going to football games and doing things after school with friends and things that really weren't predominantly online because it just wasn't really an option. So when things began to be online and we saw more kids moving to that, that also could just be an example of how kids are adapting to a world that's changing around them. So just using screens in and of itself isn't necessarily an addiction. They are going to be using that more. It's sort of like, where's the water hole? If the water hole used to be here, well, gosh, they're really addicted to that spot on the map. Well, but that's how they're getting their needs met. Now the water hole's kind of moved over here, and so they're navigating different ways to get that need met. So part of it, you know, is what we might understand as addiction because we just didn't experience it like that. And actually, they're just navigating a world that's changing, because peer interaction is still so incredibly important to them. And you'll hear them say that, you know, it helps me stay connected to my friends. I don't know what's going on if I'm not on Snapchat or TikTok or all the different things that they're on. So that's kind of one piece to keep in mind. This is a world that's changing. Another thing to keep in mind is that this, in 2014, so the DSM-5, which is the manual of mental illnesses, that came out with a new revision in 2013. And in the entire thing, in the actual list of diagnoses, internet addiction was not listed. It was listed in the back, kind of being considered for further review. And the team of scientists to kind of navigate what shows up in the DSM as a diagnosis or not. I mean, these are like extensive processes with incredibly smart people who really think about the ins and outs of things. So the fact that it was as an internet gaming, not internet in general, but internet gaming disorder that was mentioned, but it wasn't fully decided, that means something. That means, oh, this is still kind of up in the air. This is complicated. It's not as straightforward as what we understand happens in the brain with alcohol use. It is being considered, and so that means physiologically there's something going on, but in 2013, they weren't confident enough in it to really say, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and introduce this as a mental diagnosis. So the ICD-11, which is, oh, looks like we have some comments. The ICD-11 is, will be having internet gaming disorder as a impulse control disorder. So that's different than addiction. It is going to be in there though. The ICD-11 is what most of the world uses. And then the DSM, you know, the next one will be DSM-6, is predominantly what the United States refers or relies on. And so it may be that we're going to see that in the next version of the DSM, but it might not be categorized as an addiction so much as an impulse control disorder. So there's a lot.
Could you take a moment
Yes.
and just explain that or clarify a little bit more the difference between addiction and impulse control disorder?
Yes, absolutely.
It seems like there'd be some overlapping parts there.
Yes, yes. So addictions, so the original addictions, as we understand them, have to do with substances that our body takes in and the way that our body adjusts and responds to those external substances. So for example, heroin, you take in heroin, your brain responds to that substance in a certain way, and then your brain begins to get tolerant. So it needs greater and greater amounts of that to achieve the same positive feeling. Behavioral addictions are different because they're behavior. You're not taking in a substance, you're engaging in an activity which does elicit chemicals in your brain, but it's different. And the addiction model is different because historically you're taking something in. And so the idea of behavioral or process addictions is actually pretty contested, like still to this day. That's why the idea of porn addiction or sex addiction, these are things that we kind of refer to as if they're actual addictions. But within the scientific community, there is a lot of disagreement about, can we actually say that what's happening in the brain with pornography or the internet is the exact same as what happens in the brain physiologically when there are substances. So they're conceptualizing it as more of an impulse control disorder because they're recognizing there's seeking behavior, which is happening. You know, an impulse is, I want to do this. I want to do this thing. But it's not necessarily to achieve the effect that this substance that I took in previously got me to like feel. So it's really hard to have that conversation in a way that doesn't kind of dig into all the nitty gritty. And so I want to acknowledge that. I don't want to spend too much time in the weeds unless people really want to chat about that, and then we can totally geek out.
So I think what you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, is there are some similarities between both,
Mhm.
but there's also a very distinctive physiological difference
Yes.
that, or at least that's what scientists are
Yes.
presupposing, right?
Yes,
Okay.
currently.
Thank you.
And there's not enough in terms of like understanding, like when we look at fMRIs and like how the brain operates, there's not enough for the scientific body as a whole to substantively point and say, yes, this is the same process, so we will quantify this as an addiction. It's a something. We recognize that it's a something, but are we going to think of it as an addiction? Because there are implications if
Okay.
as far as treatment.
Thank you, Ellie.
You are welcome. And you know, everyone, obviously I totally geek out about this stuff, so thanks for reeling me in. So that's just kind of important to point out, because when we use the term addiction, the things that work for substance addictions might not be beneficial for the issues that kids, if they're addicted to their screens. And the reason that's important to recognize is because screen use is meeting a variety of different needs. You know, substance use and addictions, that meets needs totally, for sure. And screen use, and if kids are spending all their time on social media or binging Netflix or whatever different thing that they're doing, that's also meeting needs. And so for us as the adults, if we can kind of learn what are the needs that it's meeting, then we're going to be better situated to help them. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next screen, if that's okay. So this was something that was discussed in the film. Adolescent brains are designed for this idea of addiction. All that means is that they are always going to be seeking novelty and stimulation. You know, dopamine is this incredible neurotransmitter that is the reward transmitter. It feels good. When I get a hit of dopamine, something feels good. So adolescents, when they are navigating the world, the main parts of the brain that they're using are different than the parts of the brain that we're using. So the most developed parts of their brain are not, you know, the prefrontal cortex, thinking about long-term decision-making, goal setting, all that different stuff. The part of their brain they're thinking about is what's going to feel good, what's going to be cool, and so that makes it really tricky, because screens predominantly are created to feel good and to be cool. So it's sort of this really tricky, perfect mishmash of adolescent brains just want to have stuff to kind of stimulate them. And all that screens want to do is be stimulating. Because when we think about it from an economic standpoint, of course. And if any of you have seen The Social Dilemma, you know, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to watch it. And that, I think that's on Netflix too. I think that's available on Netflix. But so, you know, it's just this idea, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, TikTok, these are not neutral products. These are created to keep us coming back for more. And adolescent brains are really good at coming back for more. That's one of the ways that they're navigating the world, is they want to find stuff out. So this is just, you know, a quick picture of the brain. What's a presentation without a picture of the brain, right? So teenagers, the part of their brain that's doing the most lighting up, that's the most interested and stimulated, is the pleasure reward center. And so when you give them something that's main goal is instant gratification and pleasure and reward, of course it's going to feel good, because that's the part of their brain that's the most developed. So this is just, you know, a nice little graphic about some of the kind of differences between the adult brain and the teen brain. And what we want kids to be working on is all of this outer part of the brain here, the cortex, the prefrontal cortex. We want them to be developing that. And that's why we have to be so strategic with addressing screen use, because if we're just kind of, you know, fun killers and we say screens are rotting your brain, well, technically we don't know that, first of all. And also that's boring. That's not very fun, and that's not encouraging them to use critical thinking skills. So this is one of the, this is one model looking at dopamine and this idea of digital binging, which was coined by this guy named Clifford Sussman. He's a doctor out in Washington, DC, I think, or the East Coast. So as we've kind of already talked about, dopamine, this is the reward neurotransmitter. This is the neurotransmitter that feels good. And we get a lot of dopamine when we have instant gratification. I mean, who doesn't like getting what they want immediately when they want it? I like when I get what I want. So there's this idea, and again, this is still being navigated within the scientific community, but there's this idea, if you are continually doing highly stimulating activities for great periods of time, it can get kind of tricky. So we have, I'm not going to get into a description of like brain cells, but I'm happy to provide resources about it. Essentially, neurotransmitters go from one neuron to another, and the part of the neuron that receives is called the receptor. So when we have highly stimulating activity, it's sort of like this explosion of dopamine going from one neuron to the other. If you're doing a highly stimulating activity for hours and hours and hours, this really interesting thing has been noted to happen called downregulation. What that means is that if, let's say, this is just made up, you know, you get 4 units of dopamine from doing a regular highly stimulating activity, and that gets plugged into 4 receptors, okay? So kind of like 4 units received in 4 different ways. If you were doing something highly stimulating like Fortnite, you're going from 4 to like 40 units of dopamine, like explosion of dopamine. And what it ends up doing is it decreases the number of receptors on the other neuron. So you get 40 units, but instead of having 4 receptors to kind of take that in, you get like 2. And so this is difficult because it leads to a decrease in our ability to feel pleasure. So kids go from playing video games to feel good to playing video games to not feel bad. Now, I recognize that this sounds a lot like the addiction model, and I just want to kind of point out there again, this is an idea that's being thrown out there. This is one model that's being discussed. The science is still weighing kind of the different ways that they understand this. But we do know that dopamine over highly stimulating activities over large periods of time does make it difficult to feel good later. And it makes it even more difficult for kids to tolerate boredom because they're used to these incredibly stimulating large amounts of dopamine, but they have less receptors to kind of navigate that dopamine transmission. So this is really tricky. And the cool thing is that doesn't mean all is lost. What we really want to do is, instead of thinking about, oh, so that means that we shouldn't have highly stimulating activities, no, we want to find balance. So again, this guy Sussman, he came up with this idea, well, there's high dopamine activities and there are low dopamine activities. So high dopamine activities, these are just activities that give us instant gratification. Screen-wise, it could be like video games or social media. There's also, you know, drugs, alcohol, gambling, but high dopamine activities aren't all bad. Like, it's okay for there to be some high dopamine activities. What we want to do is make sure that there's a balance with also low dopamine activities. And these are just, this can be on a screen or not on a screen. It's anything that's delayed gratification. And so he really pushes this idea that we want to have, he calls it the commuter instinct. And so if we do have high dopamine activities, if kids are on video games for, you know, an hour, we want to then have them shift to something that's more of a low dopamine activity for that same amount of time. Because what it does is it helps their brains kind of adjust to, there's a natural ebb and flow as opposed to more and more and more and more. And he uses the idea of a commuter instinct, kind of, you know, if you took the train to work, after a while, you will probably be able to fall asleep and wake up just before your thought, because your brain's kind of gotten used to the timing and the flow. So that's what he's talking about with this idea of, you know, if you're gonna have some high dopamine activity time, then let's go ahead and shift to also have some low dopamine activity time so that you're getting more of a balance and your brain's getting a break. Because kids hate being bored, and it's okay to be bored. Boredom is actually where a lot of creativity can occur, and like development of imagination and asking curious questions, because you're not getting all of it thrown at you right away. So it looks like we've got some questions. Let me see. I'm just pulling that up.
So the question is, where does watching videos fall in the HDA versus LDA spectrum?
What a great question. What kind of video? Are you talking about a procedural video of how to carve a chair that's not sped up? Are you talking about one of those really fast cooking shows where everything's already prepared and you're just like, dump, 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 bake? You know, so kind of thinking about, well, what type of gratification is this offering? Is it kind of more of a slower moving, you know, animal documentary? That could be considered lower dopamine. But it's more so, it's the process, as opposed to like, what is happening on the screen, as opposed to, is it a screen or not a screen? Because I mean, for example, if I was like me making the PowerPoint for this presentation, considered low dopamine activity. Me searching for resources, kind of higher dopamine activity, because again, there's that novelty seeking behavior. Does that kind of help answer that question?
Sue, why don't you let us know if that answered the question or not? And you're certainly welcome to add additional question or information there. Thanks, Allie.
You are welcome. But yeah, again, just the idea, it is okay to be bored, and kids are going to hate it and they're going to say being bored is the worst. Yeah, and you know what? Also, that's where a lot of really cool ideas come from. And so for us, you know, as grown-ups, part of it is being able to tolerate that kids are going to get upset. And that can be really hard. It can be really scary. We don't like when our kids are upset. We don't like seeing people mad. Maybe it makes us feel bad about ourselves. Maybe we don't tolerate conflict well. But when we model to kids, oh, you can't handle not getting your way, then that makes them think, yeah, I can't handle not getting my way. But they can. I mean, they can. And so for kids, when they're really pushing back against, I don't want to be bored, I don't want to, I believe you. Listen, I believe you. And if I was you, I would be saying the exact same thing. And shoot, we don't know what this is going to be doing to your brain. I mean, you can't blame me for wanting to look out for you. So when you can kind of collaborate with kids in that and see, can you kind of understand where I'm coming from here? Kids are going to be able to tolerate what you're asking of them, because you're appealing to their sense of reason. And we don't oftentimes give kids credit in that field, you know, their sense of reason. If you say to a kid, you know, what do you think is a healthy way or a healthy amount of screen time? And you have to say the word healthy, not what's acceptable. What do you think is healthy? Then they're gonna have to start thinking about it. Well, I think 6 hours. Okay, tell me more about why you think 6 hours is healthy. Well, because I like the number 6. Okay, that doesn't really tell me much. So when you can kind of engage with them in that way where you're saying, I know that you can think this through. I mean, we've got to figure it out together, because like, I don't have all the answers. I know you don't have all the answers because you're a kid, but I think that we can figure this out together. A lot of times kids can rise to the occasion. It looks like maybe there are a few more questions, and I also want to be able to go to the next slide if that's okay.
So we've got a question from Zach.
Okay.
Zach is asking, would completing a section of a video, a game, a goal, a level, then be a dopamine release? Basically, after a while, wouldn't your levels adjust and then a child gets the release just upon completion and no longer by the act of playing?
I need to think that through in my brain for 1 second. Would a kid, is this the question? Would a kid get a burst of dopamine from completing the activity, not from playing? Is that the question?
Yes. Does a goal have to be achieved somewhere for that to release the dopamine, I think is the question.
Okay.
Or is it the playing itself? It's a great question.
Yeah, these are great questions. So my understanding of dopamine is that it has to do with accomplishment. Like there's appetitive, like we're seeking, and then there it is. So I think that's an excellent question, and I don't know the actual scientific answer to it. What I do know is that we get bursts of dopamine from whatever it is that we're trying to do being gratified. So I think that according to that way of, this is a really good question. You're really making me think here, guys. My understanding, though, is that you get bursts of dopamine based on accomplishing whatever it is that you were set out to accomplish. If you wanted to accomplish finding out a new tweet, and then you see a new tweet, okay, there it is. I got it. If you wanted to play the game so that all the blocks lined up and all the blocks lined up, okay, great, there's the dopamine.
So really, what I think you're saying is it depends on the individual. Is their goal just to be able to get on and play, or is their goal to do that specific, there is a task they have to complete or whatever?
Yes. Yeah, it's whatever my understanding is, it's whatever the feeling of resolution is connected to.
Okay, that makes sense.
It is my understanding. And I just want to acknowledge, I think that's an excellent question. And I would have to circle back to that. I'd have to do some more digging. Because again, that's looking at the difference between process and content, which is, there's still debate about that.
Thank you, Zach, for the challenging question.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, that was a really good one. And that's how, I really appreciate questions like that, because I think that gives us like a little bit of insight into how complicated all of this really is. This is not, this is hard. If this was easy, we would have it figured out by now. We don't. And so for us as grownups, if we can kind of like, okay, I need to buckle up, it's not going to be a quick solution. I mean, think about how exponentially, about the growth that's occurred with technology from 10 years ago to today.
Absolutely.
Mind-boggling. And so if we are here today, but we're still not really sure, is dopamine occurring in the act of seeking, or is it when something has been sought? Yeah, this brain that kids are navigating, that we're navigating, really complicated device. One of the most complicated devices that's ever been understood, honestly. It looks like maybe there's a few more questions.
We've got a comment recommending the books Digital Invasion and Thrilled to Death by Dr. Archibald Hart, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life by Dr. Daniel Amen.
Yeah, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so just some real quick stats, and then we'll keep moving on. Teenagers spend, 4.5 hours on their phones, maybe 6.5 hours on screens. And, these are studies that happened in the past. And so like what's happening today in 2020, especially with COVID and everything, probably higher. Teenagers do say they feel more connected to peers due to technology, but then there's a study, which didn't have a giant sample size, granted. College students were limited to 30 minutes a day, and participants who stuck to the 30 minutes a day actually had decreases in depression and loneliness. So it's kind of contradictory. Sometimes maybe they feel more connected in one sense, but isolated in others. So these are all just, this is all just kind of additional information, not to overwhelm you, but to help all of us understand this is complicated. If it's complicated, we're not going to have a quick solution to it just yet, but it also doesn't mean that we're doomed. It just means there's a lot for us to consider. So this is pretty sad to think about. 72% of teenagers say they often or sometimes check for messages or notifications as soon as they wake up. That feels almost like a compulsion, right? And 4 in 10, and this might be higher, say they feel anxious when they don't have their cell phones with them. I mean, that's something, I'm an adult and I can attest to that. If I carried my cell phone around for the day and then I put it down, I feel almost like I'm missing a hand or something. And that's really crazy because I'm an adult, 56% of teens associate the absence of their cell phone with at least one of these 3 emotions, sometimes all 3: loneliness, being upset, or feeling anxious. And while we might say, ha, see, that means it's an addiction, another way to kind of understand it is this is a way that teenagers are trying to feel connected to others. And this is a way that teenagers regulate themselves. So rather than immediately saying, okay, it's an addiction, it's bad, what we can kind of think of is, oh, well, maybe we need to give them some other skills to regulate themselves. So if they do feel lonely or upset or anxious, they've got some ways to cope with it. Social media, this was a really interesting idea that was put out. So we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, we have physiological needs, safety, love, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. So these smart folks kind of connected to reasons that people post on social media, connected to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So sometimes people post to benefit the health or well-being of their friends or family. Sometimes it's for reasons due to safety, physical, mental, and financial security can be important for people when they choose to post some material on their social media. I mean, if you think about influencers, you know, that's their living, right? Love and belonging, users generally want to post to feel some kind of social acceptance from a group or a particular individual. And what a wonderful thing to want. You know, when kids are like, oh, well, it helps me feel good about myself. I'm so glad you want to feel good about yourself. I think that's great. I wonder if there are other ways that we could help you to feel good about yourself. You know, we don't want to demonize kids wanting to be accepted or feel validation, but we do want to help them kind of think through, is this the only way that we should be seeking this type of affirmation? Esteem, you know, kind of goes along with this. People will post this, it's me-centric content regularly. If you think about teenagers, so much of what they post kind of seems like the same picture over and over again, but with different filters. Part of it is they want people to say, oh, you look good, or whoa, that's really cool, or I wish I could do that. And validation is a wonderful thing to want. You know, teenagers and self-esteem is tricky already, let alone all the different images that they have to kind of siphon through. So of course they're going to replicate that because they're trying to kind of keep up. And while we as grown-ups might see that as like, oh my gosh, like you're set up to fail, you know, all this stuff is fake, there's Photoshop, none of it's real. If we can still connect, help them understand what you're wanting is not bad. What you're wanting is validation. Then that helps them not feel shame that they're trying to seek that external validation. And it gives them the opportunity to, are there other ways that maybe I could try and meet this need? Because we want to, you know, again, we want to be flexible with them. We don't want to be shutting them down on, well, you shouldn't be asking, you know, looking for likes on Facebook. Well, why not? It feels good. Maybe there's some other ways also that you could feel good about yourself. Could we think of that together? Because most kids, you know, they do have ambivalence about the fact that if you talk to them, if you're able to sit with them and be curious with them, they don't love the fact that, like, of course, that's the only way I feel good about myself. So when we can kind of think through, well, what are some alternatives to that? Are there ways that you could, I don't know, connect with people in real life and have conversations about your friendship versus getting more hearts on your Instagram picture? Kids are able to kind of like, no, that might be weird, but also it makes sense that, you know, it makes sense that I want validation. It makes sense that I want to feel good about myself because feeling good feels good. And then finally, self-actualization. You know, when we have things that we do that we're proud of, like getting a new job or finishing school or winning some sport event or doing a really great job at an art project, we want people to know about it. We want people to be proud of us. And so of course, kids are going to be using social media for those reasons as well. This is just a little bit more of the brain science looking at, I mean, essentially using social media impacts your brain. Kids will feel more dopamine when they are getting affirmation in the form of likes or comments about you're so beautiful, you're so gorgeous, this is so cool. Their brain's gonna go, whoa, that felt good. And when kids feel excluded, the parts of their brain that kind of deal with emotional and sensory processing are reactive because they're feeling left out. And we all can relate to the idea of feeling left out and how bad that feels. So when we can help kids understand, you know what, this is something that's happening for you, but also this is just one experience of many. And so while you maybe feel left out right now because of this post that you're looking at, also, are you really left out? You know, what about this friend that you have? Or what about this thing that you told me you're really looking forward to? When you're helping them kind of have perspective outside of just getting validation from the screen, they're going to have a more balanced approach to themselves and to the world. So some questions that I like to ask with the clients I work with is social media. What function does it serve for you? What is it accomplishing? Are there any other options? Using words like insight development with teenagers, like, do you know what insight is? Here's what insight is. It's being aware of what's going on inside of you and thinking through this, that, and the other. Helping them, do you think developing insight would be helpful for you? Well, maybe, I don't know. Okay, how would insight development be helpful when we think about how bad you feel when you don't get the likes on social media? Or how anxious you get when your mom takes your phone away from you because you got in trouble and now you can't respond to someone's Snapchat. Yeah, maybe insight could be kind of helpful. So actually going there and like being explicit with like, social media is doing things for you, or video games are doing things for you. Can we kind of think this through together? Or do we just want it to kind of run your life? Because right now to me, it kind of feels like it's running your life. And then I also really like to talk about the idea of values with clients. So if a teenager is like, I love video games because it makes me feel good about myself. Okay, so one value you have is like feeling good or feeling competent in the world. Neat. Are there other values that you want to try and live out? Well, I like my friends. Okay, are there ways that you can connect with your friends that aren't just online? Because you were telling me before, like, yeah, you're like talking to your friends, but you're also not totally paying attention to them because you're trying to kill the aliens or whatever. So kind of bring up the idea of values and how are they living out their values when they're using screens or not using screens. So I just want to kind of pause for a second and check in. How is everybody doing?
I think you're giving us a lot to think about, Allie.
Yeah, it's so much information, right?
No, not too much, just a lot to think about. Some of the things that you're talking about, I can see, you know, having conversations with adult friends about, not just
Exactly.
with our children.
Right, yeah, yeah. So I see teens are setting peer expectations for who is hot, who's gorgeous, who is smart, who is not, who can be in, who can be out. And I think that that is really excellent. I think that's a really excellent thing to explore with kids. You know, there's this, I haven't checked into this a whole lot. So, you know, I don't take this just at face value, but apparently some kids are attempting, first of all, like, they can't, but they're trying to get plastic surgery so that their faces look the way they look with filters, like the different filters that kids can put on. I don't mean filters where they like become a dog or something, but filters where they're really airbrushed and, you know, all that, you know, maybe their eyes are bigger. Kids are hoping to change their faces. And I think that that's, I mean, for me as a grown up, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes me so sad for them. But I also think it's a really interesting, conversation to have, like, oh wow, should that become a new norm? Like, what do you guys think? You know, people have done body modifications for most of human history. Do you think that's the direction we're heading in? Do you think that you would be okay with that? Do you ever think about that? Do you ever wish that you looked more like an anime character? And then what do we think about that? So, sorry, I'm just kind of looking at these real quick.
Harley has raised the point of it. She feels it could be dangerous to make assumptions when the science is still out there.
Yes. Yes. And that's why I really hesitate. I really hesitate to use things like addiction when the science is still out there. You know, there's a study, one of the first longitudinal studies being done looking at screen use and brain development for children. I think it's going to go on for about 10 years. And I have a short little clip that we can look at, or I can just make available to everyone. That's really trying to understand is our brains over time or can we see differences in brain development based on access to screen time? And, you know, one one finding thus far, because this hasn't been going on for very long, just a couple of years, but one finding thus far is, and I'm going to see if I can get it right. Actually, let me just go to the slide, actually. Okay, here, oh wow, it was right there, perfect. So kids who spend more than 7 hours a day on screens have brain differences, mostly in its premature thinning of the prefrontal cortex. So this is tricky because that's something that they're seeing, but they don't really know what that means. They don't really know what that is, what kind of long-term effects that's going to have. They're just seeing that that is a difference. So it is really tricky. We don't want to make assumptions because, again, this is a plane that is being built as it's being flown, and it's being flown at 5G an hour, which is really tricky. But so when we kind of think about, oh, I'm going to have this unilateral, no technology ever, or only technology that I've decided is okay because of this reasoning that's not actually backed by science. Like, I really think it's okay to say to kids, and I say this a lot with the kids I work with, we don't know what's going to happen. That's why all the grown-ups were so stressed about it, because we love you guys and we want you to be okay. And we don't know what's going on. And when we can kind of be transparent with them about that, I have seen they're able to get on board with, yeah, maybe we should be a little bit kind of hesitant, like I like to give the example when people started smoking cigarettes, it was like, woohoo, cool. Yeah, let's do it. And we had no idea what we were getting into, right? No idea. And then science tried to keep up and was like, oh gosh, this actually can get pretty tricky, guys. But we didn't know that for a long time. And then we had to kind of, really reel it back. So being able to give kind of examples like that, I know that my reaction to this is based on the fact that I'm a grown up and I didn't grow up with this. And so, naturally, generationally, we're more hesitant to try things that we're not as used to. But the other thing is, like, we just don't know what's this going to do to your brain? The world's never seen high-speed internet before. And when kids are able to kind of hear that and hear it from yeah, I'm just trying to figure this out because, like, I want good things for you. I don't want you to be like perpetually miserable and bored. Like, hopefully most kids can connect with that their parents aren't just like dreaming up ways to make them miserable. But we are really trying to figure out this thing. It's sort of like if there's a brand new fruit and it's like really amazing tasting, but we have no idea what it does to your liver. Oh, yeah, we're going to be kind of hesitant about it, especially because the science is mixed. So yeah, Carly, I think that's a really great, it's important to be cautious and to be honest about that with kids. You know what, we're figuring this out as we go along.
I think we've got some more thoughts in the chat room, and they're talking about, kind of to go on what Carly was talking about, that social media can have such a different impact on people as individuals. One person may feel very lonely and another may feel very connected to using social media.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some clarification from Lori on there talking about the impact based on experience, based on the student's resiliency, based on so many different individual factors. But at the same time that we don't have the science to back it up, you still have to deal with the impact it's having on kids' lives. And so there are assumptions I think you have to make.
Yeah, well, and that's where I really like to go, like, how is this working for you? Like, it's kind of like the Dr. Phil question, but just asking kids, like, how, like, overall, like, the time that you have on social media, does it make everything better? Does it make everything worse? Is it somewhere in between? Most of them are going to say it's somewhere in between. Sometimes I feel really bad about myself, but sometimes I feel really good. And just being able to understand that and, like, yeah, of course. I mean, if we think about it, like, kids, and if you work with kids, you know this. I mean, this. Kids want to try things with other people because it makes them feel good about themselves. Cool. Great. I love that. I love that you want to feel good about yourself. That's neat. Let's think of a few different examples of where there might be some pros and cons. So a kid wanting to play sports. Great, you want to play sports, you're going to get better at something, you're going to have success. Well, what if you become like so obsessed with it that the only way you feel good about yourself is if you're doing good with sports? Well, kids are going to go, oh, well, that probably wouldn't be good. Oh, well, why not? So where you can kind of give them some situations to place what it is that they are experiencing with social media or video games or whatever the particular screen content is, then they're going to have to kind of think it through a little bit and be able to, how is this impacting my life? Well, I mean, yeah, it's cool when I feel, when I like make jokes with my friends and like share stupid memes or whatever. Like memes are great. Yeah, awesome. Also, like if you're doing meme stuff so much that you like didn't hand in your homework assignment, I mean, how do you see that working out for you in the long run? And some kids, they're like, well, I won't, they're good at being in denial. And then you can say, yeah, I've heard you say that before. But this is like, we do keep having this conversation, don't we? And then you can even use the D word, denial. And then kids, they gotta be curious about it, like, oh, maybe this is, but it's when the grownups are able to have more of a curious approach rather than preacher at the pulpit approach. And that can be hard to do because this elicits strong emotions in everybody. I mean, holy cow, we're having a, CEU about it, right?
Right.
But when we as grownups are able to kind of like, let's slow it down a little bit, and how can I want to equip kids to have critical thinking skills and make choices that feel good for them for the short term and for the long term, that has their best interest at heart. So is your current amount of screen use, is that going to serve you in the long run? I mean, let's just, I don't know, think about it. And if they're able to come up with a compelling reason for why, I'm willing to entertain it. And then if this does become a problem, can we circle back to it? And they'll say, yeah. Yeah, and how would we know if this is becoming a problem? And they'll be able to identify that.
So it's really about, if I'm interpreting you, Allie, it's really about guiding questions and doing it in a very calm, kind of low-key sort of way. That's what you would call the insight development technique.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Because if you, I mean, one of my favorite examples, kids are going to go off of the feeling that grownups put out. Whatever vibe we put out, that's what kids are going to react to. So think about if you had the terribly embarrassing experience of your parents teaching you about the birds and the bees. Okay, most likely your parent, when they were like, I need to talk to you, they were petrified, they were anxious, maybe they were kind of irritable, maybe they were totally shut down. Just that feeling that they're emitting right there is going to impact your reception to whatever the message is. So if you are, if your kid's on their screen and you're like, Bob, you're on your screen again. Oh, already we're set up to fail. It's going to be a power struggle. Everyone's going to be crying. Something's going to get thrown. No insight is going to occur. No one's going to feel connected because we're all dysregulated. If we as grownups can kind of understand, like, yeah, this is the water that they're swimming in. And like, maybe it's not that like the water is bad, but we do need to find how to adjust to it so that it doesn't overwhelm us. And we can be transparent with kids about that. I totally think that sometimes I have a bad attitude about your screen use, Timmy. And can you also see like why it makes me so nervous? When we have kids kind of do perspective taking, can you kind of see where I'm coming from? That, I mean, one, that's like a big developmental task that they need to work on brain-wise, is not making themselves the center of the universe. But when we, can you kind of understand why this is like, I mean, grownups, why grownups like freak out about this stuff? Can you kind of understand why? Well, yeah, I mean, you guys are kind of overreacting, but yeah, I kind of get it. Cool. That's awesome. I appreciate that you are willing to kind of take that perspective, because that's what I'm trying to do too, and understand, why this is such a fun thing for you. Then kids feel like we're collaborating with them and we're not dreaming up ways to make them miserable, as sometimes they think we have the time and energy to do, which is just hilarious, I think.
Absolutely. So I think you've given us some great suggestions and techniques here. Absolutely. Empathy, walking in your parents' shoes. Can you understand where I'm coming from? The guided questions toward helping them to internalize those issues themselves. Those are great suggestions. We have a couple more for you. Ready for another question?
Yes.
Alango wants to, this is a great question. So kids say everybody's doing it.
Mhm.
Why can't I? How do you respond to that question, Allie?
Oh my gosh, I
I
love
wish I would have known this one 15 years ago, seriously.
Yeah, I love that question. So the way that I like to kind of approach that is, that's fair. You're right. Everybody is literally it probably feels like everyone is doing this, and maybe most people are. Also, does that mean that it's healthy? And again, and kids might not be able to totally relate to this, but like the smoking cigarettes example is another really good one to go back to. Or I don't know, eating a pound of bacon every day. Like there may be some communities where like, yeah, let's eat bacon on the regular all the time. So normal, of course. And like, oh gosh, but we're learning what bacon does to like your arteries. So contrasting what's normal and then what's healthy, I think is really important, because there's so many things that are normal. Shoot, like it is super normal for like kids to try marijuana. Does that mean that, yeah, because it's normal, you should go ahead and do it right now? Well, I mean, if you say that to a kid, they're gonna go, well, I mean, because there's a difference between normal and healthy. And this is something where we just don't know yet. And I really think that adults being transparent with kids, one of the reasons that this is hard, and one of the reasons that I freak out about this, is because I really love you and I want to help you make good choices. And shoot, this is not clear cut, this is just not. I really wish that, and I feel like this, I wish that there was just like a magic cutoff where you're allowed to have, you can have 100 milligrams of caffeine a day and 2 hours of screen time and you'll be healthy. But anything over that and you'll die. No. It's so much more complicated than that, because screens are accomplishing so many things for kids and for teenagers. I mean, outside of school, school is like one giant piece of it. But when we as grownups can really kind of normalize, like, yeah, of course you want to be on this all the time. I get it. I mean, your brain's like so stimulated by it. And like, what about balance? And you can kind of like appeal to like, well, are there other things that like matter to you in life? I like to kind of make the joke with the people in the future in WALL-E, that kids movie, where everyone was just sort of like in like this lazy boy, like on a screen all the time, like buzzing around, drinking like a 64-ounce soda. Like, totally, that's hyperbole, that's a joke. But like, can you see why, like to kids, like, can you see why like people would say, yeah, this is what the future could become? And then kids are like, yeah, I mean, that would never be me, but okay, totally. But how do you think things like that would happen? And then they begin to see like, well, it is really hard for me to stop playing Fortnite. I mean, it is. And when you're able to help them reflect on their own behaviors, not where you're lecturing them, but where you're just being curious with them and like what matters to you? Like what would you like your life to look like? Like when you think of your future, are you like, a cool day for me would be wake up, check my phone for an hour, go to whatever my job is, come home, be on my phone for 2 hours, then watch TV for an hour, then eat dinner, and then like, is that like, how is that what you want for yourself? And then they can just kind of think it through. I mean, some kids might be like, honestly, I think that sounds okay. And that's really tricky, because then, we cannot change a kid's attitude. Like we can model attitudes, but like at the end of the day, kids are going to have to come to their own conclusions about what's important to them in their life. That's just, otherwise they wouldn't be humans,
Thanks, Allie. Let me move us on to a couple of other thoughts. In the Q&A, we've got COVID has increased screen time tremendously to the point where it's consumed their life in quarantine. Quick answer to, what do you think happens next?
Gosh, yes, what a good question. I do know that if we take scare tactics, kids aren't going to listen to us. And I know that if we don't do anything, we have no control, we have no influence over what could happen. So being paralyzed is not going to be helpful. Also, freaking out is not going to be helpful. Kids are able to see that a problem is solvable when the people around them model, yeah, we can figure this out. I don't totally know how, but I think we can figure it out. I think that the thing that would help us figure it out is to make sure that we're talking about it together. And for me, that means knowing how to listen to teenagers and kids. And it also means knowing how to be assertive and have boundaries even when they get upset. And all of that stuff can be tricky. There was a kind of a discussion about, well, if kids are having so much more time on screens and then the world eventually goes back to normal, well, we have to wean them off. Potentially. I think that for right now, keeping in sight the fact that the world feels pretty out of control. And we can be conscious of that still, even today. I know it's October, but for kids, I mean, think about the information that they're receiving. Can you imagine having Twitter when you were a teenager? Oh my Lord, I would lose my mind. So when we can just have a lot of grace and compassion, like things are really overwhelming right now, things are overstimulating. What are some ways that we can kind of do the LDA, the low dopamine activities, so that we're still connecting with kids and we're helping kids feel connected to themselves, but not this, intense kind of million miles per hour stimulation. That's going to help with balance. And when we can talk about just reiterating again and again and again, I don't know the answer, but I do know that I love you and I'm here to help you. Or, like I do know that I don't know the answer, but I care about you and I'm here to help. I think that we can all be part of the solution. That right there kind of promotes hope, which that's what kids look to grown-ups for. They look to us for, is it going to be okay? And we can look at them and say, it's going to be tricky, but I think it's going to be okay.
I so much insight today, Allie. Just great things. I want to just reiterate a couple of things that I'm taking away from today, and I know we could continue going. We're still getting comments in the chat room. People are clearly appreciating what you have to offer. Again, in response to dealing with our kids and talking with them, or with our students or patients or clients, however, guided questions, insight development through guided questions. You really stress the importance of being calm and rational and non-judgmental in your comments and how you're dealing with them. Balance, I think, was what you were talking about in terms of drawing boundaries. And by the way, that's been a word over and over again in our series as we're talking about it, is achieving that right balance. Acceptance and support. Can you understand where I'm coming from as a parent or as a teacher? Normal versus healthy was a really important point to help kids to understand what that looks like. And assertive, even when kids are upset, maintaining your boundaries and being assertive. And I think the best message, I think, and maybe it's something we all need to hear, is your last piece that you said was, it's still a struggle, but it's going to be okay.
And I really think that that's what, when we can all connect with that, like, whoa, this is tricky. Like, this is 2020 is a tricky year. TikTok, tricky. I mean, school being hybrid and then being in person, but then being made back to be e-learning again. Like, these are all really tricky things. And it's so great that humans are so creative and resilient. And for just as many problems as we come up with, we're also able to come up with solutions, especially when we do it together. I think that that's one of the most important messages that I try to communicate to the families that I work with, is we don't have to do it alone. When we feel isolated and alone, problems feel like that much bigger. And if you feel just a little bit connected to another person, I mean, think about, if you're having a bad day at work and then a colleague's like, hey, I get it. You're like, oh my gosh, okay. It's going to be okay. And how incredible that is when a kid, if they're feeling really demoralized or overwhelmed or stressed, and grown-ups are able to say, I believe you. Like, dang, this sounds really hard. And I know it won't always feel like this, but while it does, I'm here, okay? That's what kids, I mean, that's the bridge, between impossible and possible is, but I think we can.
Ellie, we could not end on a better note than the bridge between possible and impossible. This has really been just an amazing discussion. We could easily keep going, I think. We want to thank you for being with us today and for the insight that you've shared. It's been
Absolutely.
truly amazing. And as a person who's been involved with youth my entire life, I appreciate it more than I can tell you. And I believe that those that participated today feel the same way.
Oh,
Let me wrap up with just a few housekeeping details if I can. All of the bios and our previous portions of this series and those that are coming can be found on our website at www.c3ohio.org under the events tab. I want to thank you, Allie. Again, you were absolutely amazing, and I applaud you, and I think that all those that are with us today are doing the same. I also want to thank our partners, Lakota Local School District, Butler County Mental Health and Addiction Recovery Services Board, and Envision Partnerships. For upcoming, we have the Zoom link that you used today should be used for all 6 of our workshops. And we look forward to seeing you for our next week.